Hello everyone. So I have made a bunch of TD videos over the last few months, but never went over how I feel about the seasons, episodes, and characters in general. Today's video is about Total Drama Island, and as I'm recording it, which is July 8th, it is the 14th anniversary of the season, though I wrote the script beforehand. That was just kind of ironic, and things just kind of aligned in that way. Anyways, the format of the video is going to involve me briefly discussing my feelings about every episode, and then I will delve into how I feel about the person overall who was booted in that episode. By the end, I'll give a concluding statement about the season, and then I will rank the characters and the episodes overall, which I will show in a chart of some sorts. Not So Happy Campers Part 1 didn't have much going on, as most of the episodes was of the cast arriving, and we got a feeling of each and every one of them, while hinting the important interactions of the season. Standout for this episode was Heather, Duncan, Lashana, Gwen, and Lindsay, and the people who I either didn't care for or didn't like at all were Trent, Eva, Ezekiel, Justin, and Katie and Sadie really annoyed me in the episode. Not So Happy Campers Part 2 isn't as good as the first part, since I mainly found the challenge, especially the second part of it, to be quite boring, but I did like seeing Lashana and Heather argue, and most of the cast made great impressions on me. Ezekiel is the boot in this episode, and he's, of course, awful, as he's not only sexist, but a booger picker as well. He didn't leave a good impression on me in the first episode either, and I was fine with him being the first boot. We clearly were not supposed to like him, so we don't feel bad about his boot, and they did a good job with that. The big sleep had the entire cast go on a run and eat, so they became more tired, and the real challenge was for them to avoid falling asleep. I really did like the challenge, though the time gap of it taking place over several days is quite plot holy. The issue with the episode is that so many of the cast are under the radar / invisible, and the only really important interactions we get to see are Gwen and Trent, as well as Heather creating an alliance with Lindsay and Beth, and of course Eva snapping on everyone. Speaking of Eva, she was awful in this episode, and her tantrum was not one I found to be entertaining. So I was more than fine with her going here. I did like her in the second episode, so I bumped her up a bit for me not hating her. I am, of course, going to discuss her again once she comes back in the merge. Dodgeball is a top tier episode, and I really loved the challenge. You got to see the dynamics of the Gophers and the Bass teams perfectly. Tyler and Lindsay were great in the episode. Harold, of course, had his epic moments, and I found Courtney and Duncan to be amusing. Others like Cody, Lashana, Gwen, and Oren had their great moments, and more of the cast was making an impression on me. I think Heather went too far with Tyler in the episode, and it was uncomfortable to watch. Of course, Noah got a lot of screen time, and it was done so his boot would be unceremonious and for us to hate him. They accomplished the job well, and he only had a decent moment in the first episode, so he was kind of forgettable at best to slightly unlikable throughout the season. This episode is everything that a TV episode should be like. Not Quite Famous is a good episode, though it's not one of my favorites. Since we are in a summer camp, of course they were going to do a talent show, and we got a vibe of more of the campers' personalities, and we got to see more dynamics. I found Courtney and Bridget to be a really likable duo. Harold was a boss again in this episode. Lindsay and Heather were great. I liked Izzy and Beth, and even some of the guys like DJ, Jeff, Owen, and Trent with some of the moments they had in the episode. I didn't care for Cody or Gwen throughout the episode, especially with their interactions. Whoever was not competing in the talent show tended to be under the radar / invincible throughout the episode, but that's a common thing for the first half of the season since there's so many people. Justin is the boot of the episode, and he was a complete dud throughout the season. He never spoke outside of a few words in the first episode, and him being eye candy got old really quickly. Justin represents the under the radar / invisible edgic perfectly. Next. The Sucky Outdoors is a great episode, and most of the cast had their gags, jokes, and memorable moments. Izzy and Owen were funny with Their bear pranks and their friendship, Duncan, Courtney, Bridget, and Jeff were all great in the episode, as both of those relationships start blossoming here. Heather and Lashana reacting to the craziness of Owen and Izzy was funny. Only a few people left no impression on me throughout the episode, like Gwen and Trent. Of course, we have Katie and Sadie getting development, and of course, this means one of them are getting the boot, as they made it very obvious. I wish they were given a bit more to do before this episode, so their friendship fallout could have been more interesting and had more impact, but they were likable enough for what they were throughout the episode. Katie is the one that is booted here, and I thought she was kind of amusing with Sadie with her butt itching thing in the second episode, but I also found her to be annoying in the first episode, and left no impression on me with the others. A meh at best character, and they could have developed her and Sadie a lot better. Definitely a wasted opportunity. Phobia Factor is really the first disappointing episode to me. The challenge didn't make a whole lot of sense, as some of the people got points where they didn't face their fears, and others who did face their fears didn't get a point. It was a poorly planned out challenge, and due to the nature of it, some of the others had their scenes over and done with through a quick montage, and a bunch of the cast were under the radar / invisible. Lindsay and Sadie being a duo who had to face their fears together was a nice moment. Duncan and Courtney having great relationship development, and I liked Gwen and Owen freaking out throughout the episode. The issue I have is that a good amount of the characters came off as unlikable for no reason. I don't see why Jeff and Bridget were picking on Tyler when he was eliminated, when neither one of them faced their fear, and they didn't do anything worthy in the episode either. It just came off as weird, since they're supposed to be the quote-unquote nice ones. Trent also screwed up in the episode, and I was over it. So, Tyler was the boot in this episode, and I only really enjoyed him in the Dodgeball episode, since I found him to be funny and I liked his relationship development with Lindsay to be cute here. Outside of a few clumsy gags in the first 2 to 3 episodes, he left no impression on me, and this is a common thing with a majority of the pre-mergers this season. Up the Creek is an amazing episode, and the season really starts to pick up from here in my opinion. Lashana dealing with the madness that is being Izzy's partner is hilarious, and they have a great banter with one another. Cody actually decides to be an interesting character and helps Gwen and Trent hook up once he realizes that he will never get with her. The whole plot with Jeff screwing up with Bridget due to the arts and crafts he created, and them being so damn dramatic, like them being really, really dramatic about him having a splinter in his leg was hilarious to me, as they made it seem so life-threatening, and Bridget compared it to seeing people getting eaten whole by sharks. DJ was also a good supporter and a great advice tool for Jeff throughout the episode, and he also helped them win the challenge. Courtney was enjoyable, and I found Trent and Lindsay to have great and funny interactions with one another throughout the episode. Some of the characters didn't speak, and it was a quiet episode for Heather. Izzy really is the star of the episode and completely took over. Her exit was so random but so funny at the same time, and her admitting that she lied about everything but the RCMP in the episode was amazing. There were a few episodes where she did nothing up to this point, but she started picking up steam in her last few episodes, and this is the first early boots that I really liked. Paintball Deer Hunt is another amazing episode, and I really liked seeing how everyone adapted to being a hunter and a deer in their own way. Like Jeff and Harold comforting Bridget about being a hunter, and the few of them killing it throughout the entire episode. Duncan and Courtney's interactions start to become gold as they are stuck together by their deer antlers. I really liked Owen and DJ's dynamic, as they both embraced their role, with Owen being a hunter and dumping pee on himself, and DJ running around like a deer, which reminded me of Tarzan walking like an ape. And of course, you have the perfect interactions of Beth being fed up with Heather to the point where they are cursing one another out, and Lindsay is like, WTF, as they shoot each other with guns. And then when Lashana accidentally shoots Heather, things just become so much better. Of course, we have to talk about Cody, where I liked his support of Beth throughout the episode, but him being mauled by a bear was so a Deus Ex Machina plot contrivance to spare Heather from being an early boot. He was good during Up the Creek, where he helped Gwen and Trent, but overall I found him to be meh at best and annoying at worst throughout the first, I would say, 6 to 7 episodes. And the God tier episode streak continues. If You Can't Take the Heat has great interactions by both teams, where we of course see Lashana and Beth going at it with Heather, and even Lindsay standing with them against Heather, while Gwen was just laughing at all of the mess that was happening. Of course we had DJ, Duncan, and Jeff going after Harold, which I didn't like, though I get their reasoning, but Harold never let them punk him. Even outside of that, the three of them were redeemed with Duncan softening interactions with Courtney, and DJ playing media with Jeff and Bridget, where Jeff, of course, is still a nervous wreck. Owen was left to be a punching bag, and then he ate the food, though no one punished him for it. Trent was knocked out, hence him being irrelevant for the episode, and Sadie didn't speak, again. Now it's time to talk about Beth, since she was booted in the episode. She is always someone, even in her other season, where she is under the radar or a complete non-factor for a lot of her time, but she would have a great few episodes, and this was the case here, where her final 2 episodes were really strong. Due to this, she's just kind of middling overall, despite having a few solid moments. We get to Who Can You Trust, and it's another perfect episode. Due to all the tension throughout the last few episodes on the teams, the challenge was created to exploit the drama between both teams, and it is great. On the Kill It Fast, we finally see some cracks between the bro trio, as Jeff is too busy with Bridget to the point that DJ's rabbit gets killed. Jeff lies about it, DJ is pissed, and Duncan finds DJ a rabbit, which Courtney ends up seeing. On the Gophers, you have Lindsay dropping Heather in the challenge, which pisses the latter off, and Lindsay accidentally poisoning Trent. Gwen and Heather go at it a lot throughout the episode, and I liked seeing Gwen and Lashana start to bond. Harold, Bridget, and Trent were okay throughout the episode, and they did have their few moments as well. I don't remember Owen doing much in the episode, to be honest. The cast also has more interactions, and there's not as many of them, so there aren't many people who are under the radar or invisible, since enough people has been booted by now. Sadie finally starts to speak after like 3 to 4 episodes, since after the episode after Katie left, she never really spoke, and I don't have much of an opinion on Sadie overall, as she kind of ended up being a dud. She was decent in this episode, episode 6 and 7, but she was either irritating or invisible in every other episode. There is potential for an arc there for Sadie to grow into her own person and to learn how to deal with Sadie, but it never materialized into anything. So, Basic Streaming is a good episode, but it isn't an A-tier episode like the last 4 episodes were for me, and I think it's due to most of the cast being non-factors in the episode. Gwen had a strong showing in the episode, and Heather was of course funny, mainly with how she dealt with Owen in the episode, where Harold and Courtney had A-tier performances throughout the episode. I did not like Jeff and Duncan picking on Harold for absolutely no reason in this episode, but Duncan at least had great interactions with Courtney to kind of redeem him in the episode, where it was all Jeff did in the episode. So Jeff has a poor showing here, in my opinion. DJ, Trent, Bridget, Lindsay, and Lashana were completely forgettable. Though actually no, I do kind of remember seeing Lashana, Gwen, and Bridget somewhat bond in the episode, so that was kind of a nice precursor. Despite this, I really do like the military element of the challenge, and thought it was creative. Courtney is the boot in this episode, and I did enjoy her, where I didn't enjoy her much when I was younger. But rewatching her now, I appreciate her in the season a lot. She has a lot of funny character moments where she was bossy and also pretty vulnerable as well. Courtney learned to soften up and brought out a lot of good interactions through other people. I wish she would have lasted longer, but I was fine with her getting booted here, and she's one of the very few strong pre-mergers of the season. Extreme Torture is the final episode in the pre-merge, and I do think it's an improvement over the last episode. Everything about the episode was extreme themed, and it was all in 3 parts. The challenge was fine. I like that we got to see Bridget and Gwen interact and talk about their relationships while shading the other girl's relationship as well. Them also realizing that Lashana was the little girl, and the eventual revelation that Harold wrote them was funny as F, though it could have been executed throughout the season regarding Harold and Lashana's relationship. The entire situation was comedy gold, though. Jeff was funny as ever in the episode when he was on the moose for the challenge and ended up flying across with his A double dollar signs half showing as he's flying over Chris. Lindsay was hilarious with her determination and rattling Duncan throughout the final challenge, and I liked Heather getting mad at Harold not giving up, only to try and cut the rope, and then her shirt got ripped herself, and she freaked out. A lot of comedy gold in the episode. Owen was annoying, and DJ and Trent were irrelevant. Harold showed out throughout the season, and he had a great arc, where he was bullied throughout the season, but he did get his revenge and never took crap from anyone, since he was confident in who he was. He was hilarious, had great moments, had great dynamics with a lot of people, and he proved his worth. Harold was one of the few strong and engaging pre-mergers for me. Branch of Disgustingness is one of my least favorite episodes of the season, and it's my least favorite of the season so far, which is odd since I really liked everyone in the episode. Everyone but Owen, who was just okay, then didn't bother me throughout the episode. Bridget and Jeff's relationship gets a lot of focus in the episode, and I found the situation to be cute where they're missing each other, but they are forced to be apart for the episode and the weekend afterwards. Heather tries to win over Bridget, but Bridget ends up bonding with Lashana and Gwen, both of who were fighting Heather earlier in the episode. Lindsay reacting to the situation and how she dealt with eating food was hilarious, and I even liked how Trent freaked out and how DJ handled the situation. Seeing Trent actually interact with the other guys was nice to see. The episode would have been a lot better if it wasn't for all of the nasty vomiting. It was just way too much, and the episode was just too gross for my liking, so I had to bump it down. No Pain, No Gain is where the merge actually starts, and since they needed to pad out a few episodes to get to 26 episodes, Eva and Izzy were brought back. I thought both were good choices to come back, and Eva did have a good episode of scaring everyone and causing some much needed drama. The challenge involved them doing a painful activity and being able to pull it out for 10 seconds, which caused for everyone to have their specific moment. Izzy was funny as ever in this episode, as she had that gauze thingy or that weird thing on her face, and she wanted to do it again, knocking herself out. Lashana was a queen throughout the episode and was a boss. Lindsay was funny with how she handled her dare as well. The only person that was forgettable is DJ. While this episode is entertaining, it really wasn't that important because it was a buffer episode, as they brought Eva back only to eliminate her in the same episode. It was clear to me that the people behind the scenes did not want to boot anyone who naturally made it to the merge. Eva was entertaining in the episode, as she did interact with several people, though her being mad at Bridget out of all people was a bit weird. This episode caused me to rank Eva a lot higher on my rankings in compared to how I felt about her the first time around, but she was still not around long, so she won't be that high. I am going to be honest. Search and Do Not Destroy is my least favorite episode of the season so far. One of the main reasons for this being so is that the episode primarily focuses on Gwen, Trent, and Heather in the episode, and I did not like Trent or Heather in the episode whatsoever, so it was just annoying for me to watch. And then Heather conveniently being given immunity so she could last longer started here, which was just so contrived. Gwen and Lashana have a nice friendship throughout the episode, and I liked how Lashana had her back. Lindsay and Izzy were riots throughout the entire episode, with Lindsay trying to signal Heather, and Izzy being bit by the snake that she so-called loves. Everyone else was completely irrelevant throughout the episode. Trent is the boot, and out of everyone in the season, my opinion on him decreased the most out of everyone from this rewatch. I liked him when I was younger, but now that I'm older, he doesn't hold up well at all, and he's just very boring. He did have some nice moments with Gwen, but it became clear that he wasn't his own person and was a +1 for Gwen, so the relationship felt more one-dimensional than it was supposed to be, and they were the main couple of the season. If he was not interacting with Gwen for an episode, he was a complete non-factor, which we did see in the second half of the pre-merge, and then became a pain magnet so they can have an excuse of writing him out through several episodes. They could have done something with him being quote-unquote mysterious, but they never did. Trent was disappointing to say the least. Hide and Be Sneaky is a bit better than the prior episode, but I still think it's one of the weaker episodes so far. One, Heather had to be given immunity again in a stupid way so she could avoid being booted. Also, I didn't care for the challenge, where everyone had to hide for a while. We did get to see the guys' alliance form, and the strategy element of the game was something that was heavily ignored throughout the season, and the one person who did do it, like Heather, didn't do it very well. So it was cool to see Duncan come up with this. I did find it to be douchey that he was so insistent on booting Bridget when he could have booted Gwen and another girl, especially when Jeff was always so supportive of Duncan, and even helped him get with Courtney, but Duncan never gave Jeff the same energy back. Lindsay starts to realize that Heather doesn't care for her. Izzy fights with Chef Hatchet throughout the episode, and which was epic. Jeff starts to grow into his own person. Lashana and DJ are also hilarious. Gwen and Bridget are okay in the episode, as they try to start a girls' alliance, though the skunk thing with Bridget was ridiculous. And I do think Heather was too cruel to enjoy in the episode. So Bridget ends up getting the boot, and I enjoyed Bridget throughout the season. Out of the normal girls throughout this franchise, quote-unquote unnormal, I think she's the best one, because while she was not interesting enough to be a main character, she was a great supporting character and had a lot of moments, where she was able to form many great interactions with different people throughout the season, but it was never shoved in our face. I feel like she and Jeff had the best relationship out of the others in this season, and they weren't even the main couple of the season. And I think it helped in this season because they were their own characters here, and Bridget even had some moments outside of Jeff. While she's not my favorite person, I enjoyed her presence, and she left at the perfect time. If you haven't noticed, there has been a slight decrease in quality in the merge episodes, and while that off the chain is better than the last two episodes, it still isn't the strongest episode. And of course the challenge made no sense, especially with how the person ended up being eliminated. Two people didn't compete in the final challenge at all because they were gone. Nothing happened to them. Two other people didn't even cross the finish line, and nothing happened to them. Three others were knocked out of the first or second part of the challenge, and nothing happened to them. It was a contrived way to not only keep Heather around, but to make her look like a traitor to Lindsay. Heather was just completely awful in this episode, and she's been awful for the last few episodes at this point. Izzy taking Lashana for a stroll was fun, and Lashana freaking out since she never rode a bike before is hilarious. Jeff was also pretty funny with how distraught he was over Bridget being gone, and I liked how Gwen was in her element in the episode as well. DJ, Duncan, and Owen were forgettable in this episode, to me. Lindsay being a mechanic is actually very shocking and interesting, and she really did have a good episode, and while she was booted, I'm glad she cursed Heather off, and it beeping made your imagination go wild with what she could have said. Lindsay had a lot of strong and memorable moments throughout the show, and while I was fine with her going here, they could have done it better and given her a better elimination. Overall, she's a very enjoyable character. Hook, Line, and Screamer is the first great episode in a while, and I really like how they didn't know that it was even a challenge. We got to see quite a lot of character moments from everyone. Owen and Izzy hooking up with one another, and their relationship is cute until Owen throws her under the bus. But when she's pissed at him, Owen knows that he's in deep-ish. Gwen and Duncan really thrive in the episode, as they handle the killer and are the most prepared, as they are also scaring people in the beginning of the episode. Heather knowing that it's just the producers scaring them was pretty funny. Lashana going to eat her brownies and not really caring about anything else was funny. And DJ finally speaking and coming alive was funny as heck in this episode, with how he was scared of everything and how he ran around the entire island. Jeff was forgettable in the episode and was an a-hole for ditching DJ for an ice cream truck. Really? DJ is someone that I found to be kind of forgettable at times throughout the season, since he was never really given any sort of a plot or significance throughout the season, and kind of overstayed his welcome in my opinion. But he did have some fun moments as well throughout the season, and I liked how they didn't make him the big, strong, aggressive black man archetype. So I overall enjoyed DJ, but not a favorite of mine. I found Wawanakwa Gone Wild to be a good but not great episode, and I think it was because the challenge had everyone else essentially on their own, so there was not much interactions with anyone, outside of Duncan and Heather, who knew that they needed to align with one another because they were the least liked people in the game. It's the strategic element that was not shown much on this season, which I liked seeing in this episode. Izzy is still mad at Owen for throwing her under the bus, and how she handles the gun is just hilarious to me, as she just kind of goes crazy with it. Jeff getting beat up by the beavers and Lashana getting mad at the frog repeatedly tricking her was funny to watch. Gwen bragging about getting a nice meal after winning the challenge was also pretty fun, as the others were kind of annoyed. I even enjoyed Owen in this episode, and that rarely happens. So Izzy is the boots for this episode, and I think it's the perfect time for her to go, as she lasted a while but not too long, to the point where it became derivative. While I did like her during her first one in the season, she was gold dynamite in her second run this season, and I think I ranked her the highest in all 6 of the episodes. We saw her interact with more people, and she had more room to breathe, since there were a lot less people when she came back. One of my favorite people from the season, for sure. Trial by Triathlon is my favorite episode of the entire season. It might even be my favorite episode of the entire franchise. Literally, I have everyone in the top 6 to be in the perfect tier of the episode. So, everyone is paired off with one another, and we see Jeff and Gwen paired up together, where Gwen is insecure about never being invited to parties, and Jeff has to deal with someone who was not positive like him. Duncan and Lashana, where both of them are very tough people, and they fight as he insults her weight, and she calls him out for being all talk. Owen and Heather are the only pair that have interacted with one another prior to this episode, and Owen snaps at Heather once she insults Izzy one too many times, and it was just epic. All of them are just sheer gold throughout the episode. Jeff is the boots in the episode, and I think he could have been swapped with Owen, but we know that Owen is the mascot, and I think Jeff would have been a more interesting finalist. I didn't like how he clicked up with Duncan and DJ to pick on Harold, and I didn't like how he made fun of Tyler when the latter was booted. But he was very hilarious a lot of the time, had some great interactions with people, and was always a good, fun presence throughout the show. Once he got out of Duncan's anus, I did enjoy him quite a bit, but they kind of built a conflict with them after episode 17, but they did nothing with it. So Jeff was kind of just hanging around for a while up until his boot. We visit the eliminated campers in hot Hampshire, and it was nice to see them again. Izzy was funny as heck, which I expected. Harold and Courtney are fighting due to her knowing that he rigged her out, and they then fall into the pool. Lindsay starts forgetting about Tyler right after kissing him. Eva is hilarious through the episode. Cody is also a nice presence here as well. Of course, Jeff and Bridget are hooking up. Katie, Sadie, and Noah have a nice banter with one another. And I forgot about everyone else. And Ezekiel was creepy with how he was trying to get with Bridget. Everyone else was forgettable to me. Lashana ended up being booted in the episode, and no one in the final 5 speaks. Lashana was amazing throughout the season, though some of the stuff she said in the beginning has not aged well at all. She's a strong character, had great interactions with people, had many memorable moments, and was one of the better versions of her archetype that we've seen on TV, as she's shown her nicer side as well. She did start to peter out plot-wise closer to the end of the season though. Whatever, I have previously said that was my least favorite episode of the season is a lie. Camp Castaways is easily my least favorite episode of the season. Easily. Nothing happened in this episode. Owen is more unbearable than ever with his stupid coconut joke and turning into this caveman. And I didn't even care for Heather, Duncan, or Gwen throughout the episode. I just found it to be so boring, and it was a clear filler episode. The less I have to say about this trite episode, the better. So I'm going to skip it and move on. Are We There Yeti is a good episode. They are in pairs and are put into the middle of the woods where they have to find their way back to camp, but it takes over a day to do so. Owen sucks, per usual, as he lost because he wanted to go after a bunch of sticky buns rather than crossing the finish line. Duncan being annoyed at him is funny as heck, and I liked his interaction with Heather during the episode. I also really liked how Heather and Gwen got along throughout the episode as they kept on messing with the guys. A very simple episode that is enjoyable for what it is, but there isn't much greatness. Duncan ends up getting booted here, and I would have rather him stayed over Owen. There were various points where I did not like Duncan at all throughout the season, since I don't like bullies, and he really is just a selfish a-hole for no reason at times, but he did have some hidden depths and is a very dynamic character, which definitely made up for a lot of it. He had great interactions with everyone, and was one of the other people who did think about the game strategically and brought so much to the season. I see why he was such a favorite in the season. And I didn't like him when I was younger watching the season, but as I've grown up, I really appreciate him in this season. I Triple Dog Dare You is the penultimate episode of the competition, and it's easily just essentially Gwen versus Heather. But it's clear that Heather is going down throughout the episode. All of them receive disgusting dares from the eliminated campers and have to compete to get freebies. Owen and Gwen end up ganging up and splitting the freebies Owen got to defeat Heather, and to see her kick the shaver away and end up going bald anyways was hilarious. Gwen and Heather are great in this episode, and while Owen is just okay. So some of Heather's comments have not aged well at all. And there are times where I just found Heather to be completely unbearable. But she's usually very interesting and is always willing to keep things interesting and to stir things up, whether it was drama or strategically. It did get annoying seeing how they had to drag her along without any strategic benefit and to create a bunch of these contrivances to drag her along, as they needed the antagonist to stay until the final three. Overall, Heather is still very enjoyable. The very last episode, really, is the final episode of the season, and we of course see everyone come back. Gwen and Owen were both likable throughout the episode, and there was such a feel-good element to the finale, which is great, and something that will be missing in future finales, for the most part. Heather doing everything she could to sabotage Gwen was fun, and Trent was really supportive of Gwen, which I liked. Lashana being a ride or die was fun. Duncan and Courtney as a couple was also fun. Eva's attitude was a whole mood that I related to, and it was funny seeing how much Lindsay, Izzy, and Jeff wanted the party and wanted to get Owen to win. Everyone else was forgettable in my opinion. So I did find Gwen to have that I'm not one of those girls attitude, which was annoying quite a bit, but she did learn how to kind of grow out of it and deal with different people and form some unexpected friendships, while also having some other layers to her. She's the protagonist of the season and was a very good one over the course of the season. I also talked about her relationship with Trent previously. Owen is someone I didn't really like through the season. I was kind of meh on him as a child, but I like him even less now as an adult, and I dislike him even more. He did have his fun and likable moments, but I feel like he also had his irritating and unlikable moments. Even when I was a kid, his fat guy and fart humor did not resonate with me at all. I liked his relationship with Izzy, and he had a solid friendship with Duncan, but in general, I just couldn't muster up much to care about him. I am not going to talk about the special much, but I do think it's a good episode, and it definitely set up a lot of people for how they would be like in action, like Harold, Heather, Jeff and Bridget, Courtney, and Justin. Gwen and Trent were rootable in the episode. Noah, Izzy, and Eva were a great trio. Tyler and DJ had their fun moments. Lashana kind of made me cringe in the episode with driving the truck towards Heather, though I don't think she was going to hit her. I was also very irritated with Katie and Sadie and their banter, and Owen was just never my cup of tea. Overall, it was a good episode. In general, I really like Total Drama Island because it is grounded in reality. The stereotypes work well with the characters for the most part. There were a lot of interesting dynamics, and it's more mature than all of its succeeding seasons. We had great friendships, great conflicts, great romantic relationships, great challenges, and it was a whole lot of fun. The strategic elements were lacking, and how certain people were conveniently eliminated was clearly done to spare the antagonist and to find a way to get rid of some of the fodder characters, who in normal reality TV will never get voted out normally. It definitely started the franchise on a very high note, and it might have been too high of a note, but we will get there once I cover the other seasons. So, here is how I rank the episodes and the characters. Thank you all for watching.